Wow, 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 wow. Canelo Alvarez loses to Dimitri Bivol tonight out there in Las Vegas. What a shocker. What a shocker. What a surprise. All those things. I mean, here's the reality of the situation. I mean, ultimately, Bivol won 115, 113, all three judges' scorecards. But I thought that was a little too close. I mean, the right guy won at the end of the day and Dimitri Bivol. But in terms of those scorecards, that's a little too close. 115, 113. To me, I had a 10-2. So I had 10 rounds to two. I mean, 9-3 maybe at the most. But Bivol was dominant. Bivol was in control. Bivol did every and anything that he wanted in this particular fight. He got the job done. He beat Canelo Alvarez, beat up Canelo Alvarez, and was in complete control from start to finish. I mean, it was his fight from beginning to end, and now he retains his WBA 175-pound championship belt. I just look at it in terms of Canelo. You know, the last time we saw Canelo at 175 was against Sergey Kovalev. And if you remember in that particular fight, a lot of people had Kovalev winning that fight. You know, ultimately, you know, Alvarez would get the stoppage. But before the stoppage, there was a lot of people who had Canelo winning that particular fight. A lot of people had Canelo winning that fight. I mean, excuse me, not Alvarez, Kovalev winning that fight. And so, for obviously him coming to 175, I mean, just maybe it's just too big for him. I mean, it just just maybe too big for Canelo Alvarez. He might have bit off a little bit more than he could chew, and just going to 175 and trying to beat a guy like Dimitri Bivol, a guy who's technically sound like Dimitri Bivol, a guy who you just saw the fight. I mean, he worked Canelo over with his jab. His combinations were on point. He was just frustrating Canelo. Canelo was frustrated tonight. And you guys remember last time Canelo was at 175 was against Sergey Kovalev. And you remember in that particular fight, ultimately he got the stoppage, but Kovalev did some nice work on him. And that's an older Kovalev. That wasn't a Kovalev that was past his prime. You know, we all talk about, some people talk about Canelo ultimately going up to heavyweight to fight Usyk and things of that nature. Nah. It's not. You can only go up so many different weight classes, and maybe 175 is just too big for Canelo Alvarez. Maybe Canelo Alvarez belongs at 168, and maybe he needs to just stay at 168 because 175 might be a little too big for him. He does have a rematch clause. He said at the end of the fight he will exercise that rematch clause, so he's going to go fight Bivol again. And I don't necessarily see anything different, but here's what I will say. Based on what we saw with these scorecards, 115 and 113, with a fight that was, in my opinion, 10-2, maybe 9-3 at the most. I mean, you could argue, yes, in a rematch, Canelo would have an advantage because if you look at the scorecards obviously favor Canelo. Obviously, Canelo is always going to have the advantage going to any fight in terms of scorecard. I mean, look at the fight against Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather beat Canelo up, dominated Canelo in that particular fight, and one judge had it 114, 114. So that's all you need to know when it comes to Canelo Alvarez. Even look at it tonight, 115, 113, right? That's too close. That's too close. I can't wait to look at the scorecards and see the scorecards and see where this all, how this shaped out. It should be interesting. I wonder, going into the final round, did Bivol need to win the final round to win the fight? Because if that was the case, that's just criminal. But at the end of the day, the right guy won. We could talk about the scorecards, but at the end of the day, the right guy won. Dimitri Bivol won the fight. He is the right guy. He is the rightful winner. But at the end of the day, 115, 113, I'm just disgusted with those scorecards. 115, 113 is disgusting in my opinion. I mean, it wasn't that close. Bivol was dominating the fight. Bivol was in complete control of the fight. Bivol was the clear-cut winner in this particular fight. And when I saw 115, 113, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe they're going to rob this guy, right? I was thinking at the most, 114, 140. I said coming into this fight, right? Canelo, in terms of scorecards, I feel like has an advantage. Right, coming into the scorecard, just 116, 112, Canelo Alvarez, and you got to do what you got to do to get that better. And ultimately, if you look at it, 116. If I say it's 116, 112 coming into a fight, And Canelo and Bivol won it 10-2 on my score, right? My scorecards. Yes, I mean Canelo Alvarez has a distinct advantage, but I do think 175 might be too big for Canelo. I think it showed against Kovalev, and I think it showed tonight. Kovalev was done. Kovalev was past his prime. Wasn't done, but he's past his prime in that particular fight. And Bivol is not. Bivol is in his prime. Bivol is a very good light heavyweight. Bivol is one of the better light heavyweights in the division. He's one of the best light heavyweights in the world. And we saw what he did against Joe Smith Jr. Joe Smith Jr. hits harder than Canelo at 175, and he stood up to Joe Smith Jr.'s power, and he had no problem taking Canelo's power, and he blocked a lot of Canelo shots, in my opinion. I mean, the guy was just on point tonight with his jabbing, on point with the combinations. He was just on point tonight. He didn't get rattled mentally. He was mentally sharp. You saw that one instance where Canelo was kind of waving him into the corner. He wouldn't go when he had Canelo against the ropes. He wouldn't go. He just fought his fight. He didn't get sucked in. Mentally, he was on point. He was on point in all phases of his game. His game plan was on point. The jab was on point. The mental was on point. Everything was on point for Dimitri Bivol, and now Dimitri Bivol is in line for another big payday. He wants payday. He's going to get himself another big payday because now at this point, Canelo's expected to exercise the rematch clause, so Bivol is going to get another payday. And again, I said this before, right? Obviously, you look at the scorecards. I think if you look at these scorecards, 115, 113, if you watch that fight, that wasn't 115, 113. It wasn't. It wasn't 115, 113. It just wasn't. I mean, it's just too close. 7 rounds to 5? If you watch that fight, there's no way you scored 5 rounds for Canelo Alvarez. No way. No way. But at the end of the day, at this point, at this time, Dimitri Bivol is the king at 175. And again, you got this big fight coming up in June between Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr., right? So, those guys are looking to unify. So, Bivol is maybe the best light heavyweight in the world. Canelo Alvarez, I mean, I know a lot of people were talking about, some of the things he was doing at 168, and ultimately he was able to clean out 168 pounds. But I'm looking at it, Caleb Plant, I mean, to me, in order for him to be considered the king of 175, he had to beat, in my opinion, Benavidez. Obviously, the fight didn't happen, and I don't think it will happen. And I said, there was, the reports out there that Canelo had an opportunity to fight, Charlo and Benavidez on the PBC side, and he ultimately chose this particular fight over PBC. I thought, in my opinion, the fights I would rather have seen was Benavidez and Charlo, and also the reports that Spence could have been in that mix as well. That's the fight I would have rather seen in comparison to what I saw tonight. But at the same time, you could argue Bivol was going to be the tougher fight because 175 is a division I don't think Canelo should be at. He should not be at 175. He needs to go back to 168. I don't know if he can make 160, but he needs to be at 168. Canelo has no business at 175. And I think you could argue the fight against Kovalev may have shown that because, again, he wasn't the best. He wasn't at his best against Kovalev. He got the win, but he wasn't at his best against Kovalev at 175, and that was not a prime Sergey Kovalev. So you can argue in that particular standpoint, you can argue that, this dude doesn't belong at 175. 175 might be too much for Canelo Alvarez, and I think he should think long and hard about 175. I know at this point, he wants the rematch, and I know at this point he's going to, and again, he's just talking because he's just coming off a loss. And the last time he lost, the last time he tasted defeat was 2013 against Floyd Mayweather Jr., where like tonight, he was dominated. And again, like tonight, there was a questionable 114 scorecard. Again, we didn't get 114 tonight. We got 115-113. But that wasn't that. That's the 115-113 is just horrendous. That's just a terrible scorecard. It should not have been 115-113. I had a 10-2. 10-2 I had it. So I thought Canelo just dominated. I mean, Bivol just dominated this fight. 10-2 is what I had it. And so, that's the way I had it. And, but again, we can complain about the scorecards and everything. But at the end of the day, the right guy won. And so when the right guy wins, you just take it and you just go forward. But, Canelo made no excuses. And he did say at the end of the fight, he won't exercise his rematch clause. He did say he doesn't stay like this, no problem, but he wants to be treated like a champion next time around as Bivol. But Canelo, he wants the rematch clause. He wants to make this right. And it's very interesting. Canelo, he's been speaking English a lot, but tonight he spoke Spanish in a post-fight interview. Maybe because he lost. I mean, we saw English Canelo, and it's got a decent handle of the English language, especially the bad words, as we've seen in the press conference with Dimitri Andre. But Canelo, at this point, I mean, at this point, he's going to take the rematch, he says. I don't know if it's a good idea. And Bivol is happy because, he messed up Canelo, Triple G3. So Triple G is probably sick at this point. He's sick at this point because he had an opportunity to get that payday against Canelo Alvarez. So I'm sure he's sick because now at this point, I mean, maybe Canelo changes his mind and decides, you know what? Let me just take this Triple G fight and then maybe go back to Bivol. Maybe I'll do that. But I know Bivol said he wants to be treated like a champion this time around. And, champion usually comes out last. Champion usually gets called on last. And we saw the total opposite tonight. Canelo obviously is the A side, and he was treated as such. But Bivol was the champion, and the champion needs to be treated like a champion. And Bivol, at this point, as the champion, he wants more respect, a little bit more respect in this next fight against Canelo, and I guess rightfully so, he deserves it. He deserves it based on what happened tonight. He deserves it because he's a champion. He dominated Canelo Alvarez. We haven't seen Alvarez dominated like this since maybe the first, well, it depends how you look at the first Triple G fight. I mean, I thought Triple G won the first fight. Second fight, I could see Canelo winning that one. But the first one, I thought Triple G won. But look, at this point, at this time, I think if I'm Canelo Alvarez's team, Eddie Reynoso and those boys, Eddie Hearn, who's a part of the team at this point to a degree, if I'm those guys, I'm like, look, Saul, I don't think a fight with Dimitri Bivol is the way to go. I don't think that's the way to go. I think you need to go elsewhere. I think you need to go back to 168. I don't think this is for you. I don't think this is a good fight for you. I don't think so. And again, we talk about Canelo going to cruiserweight. We talk about Canelo going to heavyweight. I think what we saw tonight shows that man doesn't belong anywhere past 168. He belongs at 168. And again, you could talk about him beating Kovalev, but again, that was a Kovalev who wasn't in his prime. That was a Kovalev who's older. That was a Kovalev who, a lot of alcohol in that belly. And just that wasn't the guy that we saw dominate the 175-pound division, Sergey Kovalev. That's not the guy Canelo fought. That version of Sergey Kovalev wasn't the guy who was dominant at 175. Just wasn't that dude. So clearly, as we go forth, I do think, Canelo needs to think about maybe staying away from the 175-pound division. I know he's looking to make history. I know he wants to make history. History is always something that's been near and dear to his heart. He undisputed at 168, wanted to unify at 175, but it's just not your weight class, man. I mean, there are weight classes for a reason, right? There are weight classes for a reason. And Bivol is a legitimate 175-pound dude, a legitimate guy. The skill set, the technician that he is, the technical skills are there. His chin. We saw how he stood up to Joe Smith Jr.'s power. I mean, Joe Smith Jr. has tremendous power, and we saw how he stood up to that power. So, again, this dude, in terms of Dimitri Bivol, we shouldn't be shocked by what we saw tonight. We really shouldn't be shocked. We might be shocked in terms of the dominance, even though the scorecards don't indicate dominance. We might be shocked by the dominance, but at the end of the day, we really shouldn't be surprised by what we saw tonight. We really shouldn't. I mean, Dimitri Bivol is no scrub. This dude is a legitimate 175-pound champion. He's undefeated for a reason. You know, this dude is not a scrub. So what we saw tonight should not be a shock or a surprise to anyone. I'm very interested to see those scorecards. See if Mike Coppinger from ESPN, we'll see if he usually posts the scorecards. Let's see if he posts the scorecards. But I'm really interested in seeing that. Eddie Hearn, Coppinger said this week, the only way Canelo is going to get beat if he moves up somewhere too heavy. Tonight that happened, but Bivol wasn't just too big. He was too good. Yeah, he was too good. He was too good. And again, I just think this weight, there's all this weight class jumping, all this weight class jumping. I mean, going to 168, going to 175, right? And then there was talk he had the chance, the opportunity. There was to maybe get a catch weight in this particular fight. Maybe that's the direction he should have went to in this particular fight against Bivol, because this is not Kovalev. This is not Sergey Kovalev that we saw here tonight. This was a guy who's in his prime. This is a light heavy that is in his prime. This is not Sergey Kovalev. It's not. So, Dimitri Bivol is a technician. The mentality was there. There was a championship mentality. That was a championship mentality we saw out of Bivol tonight. He had championship composure. He had all those different ingredients. The dude was in control mentally. The dude was in control physically. And he was just in control of this fight from start to finish. It just was in control from start to finish. And again, I'm very interested to see these scorecards. Can't wait to see these scorecards, because I'm interested to see if on any of these scorecards, did Dimitri Bivol need the final round to win this fight? Or was it a situation where it was, he was in control? Was it a situation where it was 7-4 going into the final round? Or was it a situation where it was like it was on the table, right? He had to win it to get it done. Was it a 6-5 situation going into that final round? Or was it a 7-4 situation going into that final round? That's what I'm interested to see. And I can't wait to see the scorecards to see what that says and how it shaked out in terms of what the judges saw. But clearly, we saw a dude who just dominated. And you saw something you haven't seen from Alvarez in a long time, is frustration. Canelo was frustrated. He was noticeably frustrated. You saw it on his face. You just saw it in his effort at times. He was frustrated. He had no answer for what Dimitri Bivol was doing tonight. He had no answer, right? Every time he thought he saw the question, he understood the question, they changed the answers. And he just had no answer for Bivol. And I don't think he'll have an answer in the rematch. I don't. But I do think he could ultimately, if they fought again, based on what I'm seeing with these scorecards, he could win a disputed decision. He could win a disputed decision for sure. Based on what we saw on these scorecards, without a doubt, he could win a disputed decision. So, again, 115, 113 is inexcusable. Way too close. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with those scorecards. Again, the right dude won, and that we got to be excited and happy about that. But those scorecards are out of whack, man. 115, 113? I mean, if you saw the fight, I would think, I had a 10-2. Had a 10-2, right? Bivol was dominating in complete control. So again, at this point, Canelo, shocker. Canelo has lost. Canelo Alvarez, for the first time since 2013, lost a fight. First time since losing to Floyd Mayweather back in 2013, Canelo Alvarez is on a receiving end of a loss. Surprising, shocking. Canelo Alvarez, and he lost a decision, right? Didn't think that was possible. Did not think a decision was possible. Because I was looking at Bivol, right? And the last time he had a stoppage was 2018. So I'm saying to myself, well, he might have to get a stoppage in order to beat Canelo Alvarez And look, he was convincing. I said he had to be very, very convincing coming into this fight if he wanted to win. He had to be very, very convincing. And he, in fact, was very, very convincing. He was very convincing in this one. And he had to be very convincing in order to win this fight. He was very convincing. He was convincing. There's no doubt about it. The right dude won. There's no doubt about it. Canelo Alvarez, right, was just not on his game tonight. And you could argue even if he was on his game, it might not even be about what Canelo did, and more so about what Dimitri Bivol did, more about what he brought to the table tonight. Because Dimitri Bivol was special tonight. It was just, you have an opportunity to make a bunch of money. You have an opportunity to win. You have an opportunity to get it done, an opportunity to be on top of the boxing world. And he took advantage of that opportunity, and he fought a great, great, great fight. There's no doubt about it. He fought a great, great fight. And again, you have to be very convincing to beat Canelo Alvarez because the scorecards and the judges, obviously, there's a slant. We can't dismiss that there is a slant towards Canelo. And so you had to be very, very, very convincing. And he was very, very, very convincing. Again, 10-2 on my scorecard. I saw Dan Rayfields. He had an 8-4 on his scorecard. Just going around seeing what some of the guys had on their scorecards. But again, the right guy won. 115, 113. The right guy won. Again, so Canelo wants to do this again. So the plan initially was for Canelo to win this fight, and then ultimately him to fight Triple G in September, right? So him and Triple G were supposed to get it on in September, and then there was also the possibility of Canelo going over to London to fight maybe a John Ryder or somebody like that. So there was a lot of plans. They had a lot of plans. Matchroom Boxing, Eddie Hearn, Canelo Promotions. They all had some plans. They had a lot of plans. The plan was in place for them to go to do this, then go to Triple G. That was the plan. But the plan got intercepted. The plan failed. The plan is no longer in place because of Dimitri Bivol. What a fight. What a fight. What execution. What a great game plan. What a great night for Dimitri Bivol. He came up big in all different areas and all aspects of the fight. He got it right. And again, if you're Triple G, you are angry. You're upset. You're like, man, I'm this close to getting another big payday. I don't know how much longer I got in this game. I'm close to getting a big payday, getting some big money again with Canelo. And I am not going to, now I'm going to wait. 40 years old, Triple G. So, at 40, he might not even get to fight with Canelo. The Triple G, Canelo Triple G trilogy probably won't be. Might not happen, right? Because Canelo now has to, especially if he exercises a rematch clause, now he might just say, you know what? Screw 175. I'm just going to let this stand. I don't belong at that weight class. I'm going to fight a Triple G, still fairly a big money fight to a degree, right? Maybe not as big money of a fight as it could have been. And maybe if you're Canelo, you're like, man, maybe I should have went the PBC route. Maybe I should have fought Jamal Charlo. Maybe I should have fought Benavidez. Maybe that's the route I should have went at 168. Maybe that's the route I should have took. Maybe I took the wrong route. Maybe I fought the wrong guys. Maybe. But at the end of the day, you lost. And again, I don't stick at 175 if I'm Canelo. I don't stick at 175 unless there's a guy I think I can beat. And I thought, maybe they had to have seen something, first of a 2-fight deal with Matchroom Boxing. I would think they would have had to have seen something in Bivol to make them believe that they could beat Bivol and that Bivol was the right guy this time around. They had to have seen something in Bivol that made them believe they can win this fight. They had to. Obviously, they wouldn't have went that route because you would argue go straight to Triple G because, obviously you can make more money in that particular fight. But whatever they saw wrong because at the end of the day, Dimitri Bivol was dominant. Dimitri Bivol was clearly the better fighter. Dimitri Bivol was just dominant. He dominated Canelo, a la Floyd Mayweather, right? He dominated Canelo. And the last fight that we disputed in terms of Canelo losing, I thought was Triple G, the first fight. And I thought he lost that fight, but he got the draw. And again, I thought clearly he lost this fight. But he ended up losing 115 to 113. That's 7 rounds to 5. And I don't believe that was a 7. I don't think that was a 7-5 fight that we saw tonight. That was not a 7-5 fight. What we saw tonight was not a 7-5 fight. I mean, if you watched it, there's no way it was 7-5. No way. No way that was 7-5. No way. But the right guy won. So we can't be too angry, too upset. But it shows me that, again, in a rematch, Canelo might be able to get the rematch because if he fights just a little better, right? If Canelo just fights a little better in a rematch based on what we saw with the scorecards, well, then maybe Canelo can win that fight. But I don't think this matchup is good for Canelo, but based on scorecards, based on the fight and how the fight probably will be scored in the rematch and just going forward, Canelo has a shot. Sure. Why not? He has a shot. But again, the right guy won. And we just got to be happy about that. But and because it would have been a mess if Canelo would have won that fight. It would have been ridiculous. It would have been ridiculous, right? Would have been absolutely ridiculous if Canelo would have won that fight. Ridiculous. And, I mean, it would have been crazy. It would have been crazy if they would have given that fight to Canelo Alvarez just based on what we saw. Steve Kim, he agreed with me in terms of how close this was. Way too close. All 3 judges had 115, 113 for Dimitri Bivol. Whoa, that was way too close. They were trying to give that to Canelo. Good grief. He's right. He's totally right. 115, 113 is crazy. Totally right. The tweet is perfect. It's correct. It's totally right. 115, 113 is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Way too close. That's why I'm interested to see the scorecards. Because, again, if one of those judges had a 6-5 going into, if those judges had let's just say all 3 judges had a 6-5 going into round 12. So if they had a 6-5 going into round 12, 6-5 Bivol, and they gave Canelo the final round, that'd be ridiculous, man. Right? If it was that and it ultimately became a draw. That's what I'm interested to see. Was it 6-4? Was it a 7-4 going into the final round? Was it 6-5? That's what I'm interested to see on the scorecards. And I'm waiting for someone to post those scorecards so I can look at those scorecards and determine and see that. Because, again, that's why I say, look, on what we saw tonight, I don't think there'll be any difference in a rematch. Don't. Bivol's style. Bivol is a technician. He ate Canelo's punches. He blocked a lot of Canelo's shots. I don't think it would be any different if these dudes fought again whenever they're going to fight. A few months from now, whatever they decide to do it. I don't think it's going to be much different. But the only thing I will say, based on what we saw with the judging and the scorecards, well, you got to give Canelo a legitimate shot. But I think 175 is too big for Canelo. I pointed out early the fight against Sergey Kovalev when he went up to 175 to beat Kovalev. That was a Kovalev who wasn't in his prime. That was an old Sergey Kovalev. So that was a fight, and again, there were people who felt Kovalev was winning that fight before he was stopped. I believe he was stopped in the 11th round. So it's like, okay, based on that, right? His first entrance at 175, and then based on what we saw tonight, his second entrance at 175, and then also based on how dominant Bivol was in this fight. I don't think Canelo was ever really in this fight. I don't. I just think Bivol, his style gave Canelo fits. He was noticeably frustrated, Canelo. He just didn't know what to do and how to handle the style, the technician of Dimitri Bivol, the jab, the combinations. He did not know how to handle it. And that was clear based on his level of frustration. And that was clear. It was clear. It was clear based on everything that we saw tonight. He did not and could not handle Dimitri Bivol and everything Dimitri Bivol brought to the table. That part was clear, evident, and obvious. That was evident and obvious. And now, look, Canelo has been on top of boxing for a long time. He's still the cash cow in the sport. He's still the top name in the sport. But and he went for greatness, right? He tried to go, cleaned out 168 in theory, even though I don't think you clean out 168 if you can't really clean out 168 if you don't fight David Benavidez, in my opinion. But he cleared out 168. Let's give it to him, undisputed champion, and he went to 175, and his goal was to ultimately unify at the 175-pound division. But look, it's too big for you, man. It is too big. The 175 is too big for Canelo Alvarez. It's just too big. It's too big for Canelo Alvarez, and I think the last two times he went up to 175 shows that it's too big for him. And now, again, he said he's going to take the rematch. He said he's willing to take the rematch against Bivol. He says that he's willing to do it again. That's what he wants to do. That's his plan. That's his belief. That's his idea. That's his opinion. That's what he wants to do. So we're about to put up the scorecards right now. We're going to look at these scorecards and see, okay, what did these scorecards say? Because 115, 113 is questionable. So we have these scorecards here, 115, 113. So that's crazy. That is crazy. So going into round number 12, Bivol was ahead 115, 104 on Steve Weifeld's card. 105, 104 on Steve Weifeld's card, 105, 104 on Moretti's card, and 105, 104 on Cheatham's card. So, looking at these scorecards now, if Canelo Alvarez would have won the 12th round on all three of these scorecards, or at least, two of these three scorecards, we would have a draw. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Look at that. It was 105, 104 going into round number 12. That's crazy. So if Canelo would have won round 12 on two of these scorecards, we would have had a draw. That's crazy. That is crazy. 105, 104 on all three of the scorecards going into round 12? Come on. And these are fairly respectable judges. Come on. 105, 104 going into round number 12? So that's crazy. That's just crazy. That's crazy. That's the only word I can use. Crazy, ridiculous, insane, stunning, amazing. A draw would have been highway robbery. And that's crazy. And just think about it. We all know, based on the Mayweather fight, where it was 114, one judge had it. That was clearly a unanimous decision fight. That turned out to be a majority decision. So let's make this clear. Going into round 12, Bivol needed to win round 12 to secure the victory. Now, if Canelo, again, would have gotten round 12 on two of these three scorecards, we'd had a majority draw. Wow. 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 That's crazy. That's crazy. So that looking at these scorecards, Canelo easily could win a rematch. Not because he's better than Bivol, not because he's not because he is better than Bivol. No, because of the judging. Look at these scorecards. If you look at these scorecards, and you can't tell me by looking at these scorecards that Canelo, even though I think Bivol is the better fighter, would not be able to win a rematch. You can't tell me that. 115, 113, 105, 104 going into the final round? If Canelo, let me repeat myself because it's crazy. But if Canelo would have won round 12 on two of those three scorecards, it would have been a draw. Think about that. All that work that Bivol put in, all that dominance, all that good stuff, all those jabs, all those punches, all those combinations, all those things would have been for naught if Canelo would have won round 12. So, again, that being said, Canelo should take the rematch. Why not? He's got the scorecards on his side. He's got the judging on his side. Why not take the rematch? You can easily win this particular fight. You were dominated in this fight. Maybe 8-4 at the least. 10-2 in my opinion. And there's just, it's crazy how you can't be, this would have been highway robbery if we would have got a draw here tonight. Highway robbery. Again, going into round number 12. Going into round 12, right? If you look at it, 105, 104 Cheatham's card, 105, 104 Moretti's card, 105, 104 on Weisfeld's card. So, again, if Bivol loses that 12th round on two of those three cards, we would have had a majority draw here tonight. And then there's no way that was a majority draw. There is no way. That's crazy. That's just crazy, man. To think that we would have had a draw here tonight in that particular fight, that's just nuts. That's nuts. It's crazy. Look at it's crazy. We would have had a draw here tonight if Canelo would have won on two of the three scorecards in the final round. We had a draw. We would have had a draw tonight. If anybody watched that fight, that was many things, but a draw it was not. That was not a draw. And it would have been a draw. That wasn't 115, 113. 7 rounds to 5? And it would have been a draw, again, if Canelo would have won the 12th round on two of those three scorecards. It would have been a draw. Unreal. Canelo got beat up, in my opinion, got beat down, was dominated on all levels in this particular fight. Bivol was clearly the better fighter, the better dude. He was clear. It was clear cut. It was evident. It was obvious who was the better guy tonight. Who was the better guy tonight? That was clear, obvious. There is no doubt about it. Canelo should not have been. It shouldn't have been that close. Let's look at the CompuBox numbers. Let's look at those CompuBox numbers now and see, the dominance of Dimitri Bivol. So we look at it. He outlanded Canelo 710 to 485. So the activity level was higher. The activity level was greater. Landed more, 152 to 84. So he landed more. Just the dominance, right? He outlanded Canelo in every round in this particular fight. 14-5, 14-5 in the first one, 12-8, 10-8, 10-8, 12-5, 13-6, 14-7, 13-4, 12-10, 6-4, 18-12, 18-7. And Bivol needed that final round. He needed that final round to win the fight. Otherwise, it would have been a draw. It's crazy. So, CompuBox, it doesn't always tell the whole story of a fight. It doesn't. But in this particular case, it showed that Bivol was the more active fighter. 710 punches thrown. Canelo 485. Landed more, 152 for Bivol, 84 for Canelo. It just shows that this fight, Bivol was in complete control. It shows the dominance of Bivol in this fight. But again, the scorecards and the CompuBox numbers don't line up, and it doesn't necessarily always do. But it's evident who was the better guy. It's evident who was the better fighter. It's evident that Dimitri Bivol was the clear-cut winner. All those things were evident, except for the guys who mattered, the three judges. Because we all know, as we saw in their scorecards, going into round 12, it was 105, 104 on all three scorecards. 105, 104. So after 11 rounds, 105 to 104. I don't think that was 105, 104 after 11 rounds. If you saw 105, 104 against after 11 rounds, you got to get your eyes checked. You got to get your eyes checked. Got to get your eyes checked. And I don't, watching it from home, watching it on TV, you have the benefits of replay. You have the benefits of various angles. You have you have the benefits of a lot of things. But based on what we saw, it was evident, it was obvious that Dimitri Bivol was the better fighter, was the better guy. And again, the CompuBox numbers show that. The scorecards don't, but the CompuBox numbers show that. If you watch it, the eyes do lie sometimes, but tonight they don't lie. They would, if you watched and you saw Dimitri Bivol, the activity level was better. Everything was better. Everything was better. And Canelo had no answers for any or everything that Bivol brought to the table. And again, I don't think he will have answers in the rematch. I don't think he'll have answers. But based on the scorecards, he'll have enough answers where he could get a draw or maybe even win. We did see Canelo against Triple G the first time. The first time around, I thought Triple G won. It ultimately turned into a draw. Second time around, I think you can make a legitimate case that Canelo got the nod. That was a close fight, the second one, but I think Canelo... So he made adjustments. I'm saying all that to say he made adjustments, and he was better the second time than he was the first time against Triple G. So maybe that could be the case this time around against Bivol. But we do know, again, not to belabor the point, not to keep repeating myself, but based on judging, based on scorecards, based on what we saw, Canelo just has to be a little bit better than he was tonight. And I would argue, even if he was a little bit better, that Bivol would still have won. But again, based on the scorecards, based on the judging, if he's a little bit better, just a little bit better, well, guess what? He will probably beat Dimitri Bivol. It's that simple. It is that simple. So, great night of boxing tonight. Canelo Alvarez lost. First loss since 2013. But you know what? He did lose tonight. But you know what? You got to give him credit. Because he's going up to all these different weight classes. He's taking chances. He's taking risks. He's going for it, right? He's trying to cement his legacy. He's trying to be the absolute best in the history of the sport. That's what he's trying to be. That's what he's trying to do. I mean, based on what lost to Mayweather in 2013, lost to Bivol tonight. I mean, in terms of him trying to be the best, he probably will not end up being the best of all time. He won't. I mean, it just probably won't happen. But you can definitely say he's definitely is a Hall of Famer for sure. But that's never been a doubt at this point. But in terms of being an all-time great, right? In terms of being a GOAT, nah, it's not happening for Canelo Alvarez. And maybe, he's like, maybe he's kicking himself. Like, maybe it's like, yo, I should have took that PBC money. I should have went up and fought a Charlo, right? Maybe I should have fought an Errol Spence at a catchweight, which was reportedly out there. Maybe I should have tried to go against Benavidez. So I think that would have been a tough fight for Canelo as well. But a lot of people were dismissing Dimitri Bivol coming into this fight. And I think mainly that was because of name recognition, right? Charlo has a bigger name than Bivol. Benavidez has a bigger name than Bivol. And clearly Spence Jr. has a bigger name than Bivol. So all those guys have bigger names than Bivol. And I think those guys with those bigger names, because they have bigger names than Dimitri Bivol, I think that was why we were like, a lot of people were like, well, they were kind of dismissing this fight in a lot of ways and saying Canelo's ducking, Canelo's taking the easy way out, he's taking the easy route. And clearly, if you watch Dimitri Bivol, clearly if you saw his resume, clearly this was a tough fight. A tough fight for a lot of reasons. Canelo going up to 175. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. He wasn't that great against Kovalev at 175. And the first time he's at 175, and it wasn't like he was that great against Kovalev, and Kovalev was old, right? It wasn't like, wow, like that was impressive what Canelo did against Kovalev. I mean, again, I mentioned a lot of people had Kovalev winning the fight before he was stopped. So again, Canelo, right, he wasn't that great when he went to 175 the first time, and clearly he wasn't great tonight. Wasn't great tonight. It wasn't. But obviously he made a lot of money, right? At the end of the day, he made a lot of money. Again, he's the cash cow of this sport. And again, he wants the rematch. He wants the rematch. And, on the surface, I don't think it's a good idea. I think he should stay far away from Bivol. I think he should just go back to 168 and figure something out there. I don't think he should fight Dimitri Bivol again. I don't think stylistically it's a good matchup for him. Bivol is too big, too technical, and just better. He was better tonight. Just big, too big, and just better. And I don't think going and fighting Bivol again at 175 is the move. I don't think it's the right decision. I don't think it's the right choice for Canelo. But as I mentioned before, and I mentioned just shortly ago, based on what we saw in these scorecards, and let's look at these scorecards again. I'll share them one more time with you, just so you can see how crazy it is that look at these scorecards, man. Look at these scorecards. 105, 104, Bivol going into the final round on all three scorecards. 105, 104 on all three scorecards going into the final round. Think about that. Think about that. Think about how dominant Bivol was. Think about the 152 to 84 in terms of, punches landed. Think about the 710 punches in comparison to the 450 some odd punches thrown by Canelo. Think about the activity level. Think about the accuracy and the landing of Bivol. Think about all those different things. And think about what you're seeing here going into round number 12, 105, 104 on all three judges' scorecards. Think about that. And you think about that and you figure out, okay, look, why wouldn't Canelo take the rematch? Because again, he only has to be just a smidge better. Because based on the scorecards, 115, 113, he lost by a hair, 7-5. So he just has to be a few, just a little bit better. And that's possible. It's possible that Canelo could be just a little better than he was tonight because he wasn't very good tonight. So it's possible for Canelo just to be a little better, and he could easily beat Dimitri Bivol. Not because he's a better fighter, not because he's better than Dimitri Bivol, but because of how his fights are scored. The judges, for whatever reason, like what he does. They like what he does. And if it wasn't evident when you saw 114 against Floyd Mayweather on one of those scorecards, if it wasn't evident after what you saw in Canelo Triple G1, it's very evident tonight. Canelo has an advantage in terms of the judging is on his side to a degree, and that can't be disputed. And so I remember talking interviewing Demetrius Andrade and asking him straight up, do you feel like the fight that you have to fight with Canelo has to be different? Do you have to be a little bit more aggressive? Kind of he agreed. He agreed you had to be more aggressive when you fight Canelo because, again, you have to take more chances, I think, when you fight Canelo because of how he scored, how his fights are scored. He does have an advantage going into these fights in terms of the judging. That is clear. That is evident. That's obvious. That's clear. 115, 113 is way too close. That's way too close. That was not a 115, 113 fight we saw tonight. That was not a 115, 113 fight. What we saw tonight was not 115, 113. Wasn't. That was a 116, 112, maybe at best, right? Probably more along the lines of maybe 117, 111, right? But it was a clear-cut win for Dimitri Bivol tonight. But based on what we saw with the scorecards, it wasn't clear-cut. We could have saw a robbery tonight because it could have ended up as a draw. We could have saw a robbery, right? And it would have been bad. It would have been bad. So here's the thing. All three judges had it 95 after 10. So they had it 95 after 10 rounds. So if Canelo would have won the final 2 rounds, Canelo would have won this fight. So all three judges 95 after 10. So going into the championship rounds, going into the final 2 rounds, 11 and 12, it was 95 on all 3 scorecards. 95. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. 95. Oh, after 9 rounds, going into the 10th round, after 10 rounds, Canelo was ahead 86-85 on all 3 judges' scorecards. So after 10 rounds, Canelo was up 86-85. Oh, man, that's crazy. After 10 rounds, Canelo was up 86-85. Wow, that's nuts. That's crazy. So if Bivol would have lost those final 2 rounds, he would have lost the fight. So, looking at these scorecards again, why not? Canelo should do it again. Again, stylistically, I don't think it's a good fight for him. 175 pounds, I don't think that's a good weight division for him. But based on what we saw here tonight with these scorecards, he should do it again. Without a doubt. Canelo, forget what I said earlier. I told you forget about fighting Dimitri Bivol again. Nah, do it again. Do it again. Because you're going to win. You're going to win. You just got to make a couple adjustments. Make a couple adjustments here or there. That's all you got to do. You saw a style once, right? Watch the film, figure it out. Think to yourself, you know what? Just got to be a little bit better. Not much, just a little better. If I'm a little better, well, I'll get a draw. Or at least, at least got to get a draw, probably get a win. Because after 10 rounds, and I wasn't that good in this fight, but after 10 rounds, I was up 86-85. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. After 10 rounds. Look at it. After 10 rounds. I'm sorry, I said after 10 rounds. After 9 rounds. After 9 rounds, it was 86-85. 86-85. All three judges gave Bivol the final 3 rounds. All three judges gave Bivol the final 3 rounds. If they did, and let's just say Bivol, let's just say in that final round he went on his bike. Let's just say he went on his bike, he ran around the ring, just dodging Canelo, not looking to engage Canelo in that final round, thinking that he had the fight in the bag because in theory, just watching the fight, he did have the fight in the bag, but clearly, based on what we saw, he didn't have the fight in the bag. So let's just say we watched. Let's just say he ran around the ring in round 12. Let's just say he just took his foot off the pedal and said, you know what? I got this fight in the bag. I did what I needed to do. I handled my business. I dominated this dude. I beat him up. I out-jabbed him. My combinations were sweet. My combinations were special. Everything that I was doing tonight was off the hook, off the chain, was ridiculous. I was the man tonight. Let's just say he thought that after 11 rounds. And then let's just think in that 12th round, he said, you know what? Let me get on this bike. Let me just run around this ring and don't engage this dude. And let me just walk around and just go from corner to corner, pillar to pillar, post to post. Let me just run around because I got this in the bag. Let's say he would have did that. Well, guess what? He would have had a draw. And he would have been disgusted. He would have been angry. He would have been upset. He would have been just mad at himself. Even mad at himself. But fortunately for him, he didn't run. Fortunately for him, he engaged. Fortunately for him, he did what he needed to do in that final round. He fought his butt off and kept fighting and kept the pedal to the metal. Didn't step off the gas. He kept his foot on the gas and kept fighting and kept getting it done. Outlanded Canelo 18-7 in that round. Dominated the 12th round. And fortunately for him, he stayed on point and got it done. Because again, I said it before, coming into this thing, he had to be very, 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 very convincing if he wanted to win this fight. Had to stop him, I thought maybe. Because he hasn't had, and I thought, that would be to his detriment because he hasn't had a stoppage since 2018. Right? But this dude had the perfect game plan, had the perfect fight, had a championship game plan, had a championship performance, coupled with a championship mentality, championship heart, all the qualities that you need to beat a Canelo Alvarez. Dimitri Bivol had that and then some. All the qualities you need. But the funny part is, after 9 rounds, he was trailed. After 9 rounds, he was losing the fight. He was losing the fight after 9 rounds, 86-85. So Canelo was up 86-85. And so all three judges gave Canelo the first 4 rounds. They gave Canelo the first 4 rounds. All three judges. First 4 rounds went to Canelo. And let me just look at the CompuBox. Total punches landed. Bivol outlanded Canelo 14-5 in round 1. Outlanded Canelo 12-8 in round 2. Outlanded Canelo 10-8 and 10-8 in round 3 and 4. Now, I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but they gave the first 4. There's no way that Canelo won the first 4 rounds of that fight. There's no way. So after 4 rounds, Canelo was up 40-36. So he had a nice lead after the first 4 rounds, 40-36. Canelo had a nice lead. Bivol on all 3 scorecards came back and won rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all three judges, if I'm looking correctly, pretty much had identical scorecards. So Canelo won the first 4, Bivol won the next 4, Canelo won round 9, and the Bivol on all 3 scorecards won round 11, 10, 11, and 12. So again, if you watch the fight, 4-0 Canelo after round 4, 4-0? 4-0. After round 4, 4-0 on all three scorecards. 40-36 on all three scorecards after 4. That's nuts. Again, that's why I'd say Canelo should run this back because we know what's on his side. We know the judges favor his style for whatever reason. Maybe it's more than that, but they favor his style. So, again, based on what he saw tonight, based on the scorecards, based on everything, Canelo should run this back and run it back immediately, and he probably will win. Not because he's better than Bivol, but because of how the judges tend to slant towards Canelo. These scorecards tell you all you need to know in terms of what we saw tonight. I mean, it just from what I'm not what we saw tonight. What we saw tonight should have been a little bit more on Bivol's side, but the scorecards tell you that Canelo has a distinct advantage going into these fights in terms of the judging. They seem to be slanted and favored to him. I mean, it's the way it happens in the sport of boxing. The cash cow, the A side, they have advantages. They do, and that's just the reality of the sport. Certain guys have certain advantages going into fights. And Canelo is no different than anyone else. He had an advantage going into this fight. All he needed to do was be just maybe a little bit better because he wasn't good tonight. But he got outboxed. Bivol boxed his ears off. He did any and everything he wanted to do against Canelo. Everything that Bivol did was nice. It was great. It was on point. It was a perfect game plan. It did everything he needed to do. I think he did everything that he wanted to do. And I think he was clearly happy with his performance. But again, you look at the judges, look at the scorecards, you got to say, well, it was enough tonight. But man, if he lost that 12th round, he lost his fight. Let's just say it would have been a clash of, well, I would say let's just say a clash of heads after it appeared 4 rounds or whatnot. Canelo would have won 4-0 on everything. But the reality is, Canelo just needs to be a little better in the rematch. He wants the rematch. He said he's going to take the rematch. So if he's a little better in the rematch, then he will ultimately be better, get the win, and go forward in his career. But we're out to get out of here tonight. Canelo Alvarez loses to Dimitri Bivol, 115-113, unanimous decision. Dimitri Bivol retains his WBA 175-pound championship title. Canelo Alvarez looking to make history, looking to get some more belts, more straps. Wasn't able to do it tonight. And again, he said he will take the rematch, and we'll see if the rematch happens. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're out. Later.